The wrong HR support in your business right now could be costing you thousands of pounds every single year. You'll lose time, morale, talent, and not to mention, of course, the threats of potential legal risks and costs. But look, if you get it right, if you choose and you unlock, happier staff through better HR, you get fewer headaches, you get more opportunity to grow, to scale your business, and give better support or better outputs of products that you're providing to your clients, to your patients. So, how do you know what's right for you, what's right for your business, and what's right for your staff? To be quite honest with you, my name's Mike. The company is Cavill. Today, as you may be able to tell, I'm recording this one from home, hence the headset and looking like I'm landing aeroplanes. But I want to come in and talk about our recent newsletter that we're bringing out at the moment in time for June. So I want to go through some of the bullet points on that. And I want to give you some help and some tips as to how to navigate HR and do that with confidence, with clarity, and find what is best for you and your business. I know that sounds, well, of course you're going to put yourself forward, Mike, and I will. I am absolutely 100% honest with you. I will put ourselves forward, and there's good reason, I believe, behind that. But I want to look at the multitude of all options that are available to you, and I want to look at what the good things are and the bad things to them, not just upsell Mike. But of course, 100%, I'm just going to give you a pre-warning, I will do that. This month's newsletter, we're going to go and break down how to choose the right HR support. How did I forget that one? That's the very first thing. How to choose the right HR support for you and your business. Why fraud prevention is your new front line of threats that you need to try and tackle in your business. How AI written CVs are affecting your hiring process. And so whether quiet vacationing, have you heard of that one before? So quiet vacationing, is that happening within your team right now? I've got a couple of little tweaks to that as well that I want to offer up when we go through. So let's get in, let's get on. So, our main topic today, I want to look at choosing the right HR support for you and your business. And I want to break this down into there really are four key categories that you can look at here. And I'm going to go through them in what I think is a systematic order of what businesses may consider and where you might be within your business as well right now, and what you may be thinking of doing at the moment in time. So the first one is to actually fob this off to an existing member in your team. Now, I would say from experience, this most commonly comes to a number of roles. It's either an ops manager, that could be you. We certainly do have a number of ops managers within our client base who are our main point of contact for HR. Finance managers and directors, again, same thing. You could get the owner and CEO, and they could be the key link in as well. But that's always an option, and it comes across as a cost-effective option because you're adding on to an existing role. You're not paying more salary. You're not paying more money out to some external provider such as ourselves to come and help with that. So it sounds cost effective on the face of it. The problem you'll have with that is they'll need training, and there's no guarantee that they would have had that training. And that takes time away from the actual role. So let me just break that down into a couple of important segments there. So you have someone who's trained in operations management, or you've got a financial director, or indeed it's you as a CEO and you're taking that on as your own internal role. And as a CEO, trust me, I know you're wearing lots of different hats at one time anyway. It means that you're taking time away from the core function of what you're meant to be doing, and you're dedicating that time on the HR function, which, by the way, it only takes one person, one problem to swallow all of your time on just that thing. But if you're taking your time onto that, you're also probably going to have to invest in some training, and it will be the light outskirts training. It won't be the fully kind of CIPD level 7 training. It's going to be the outskirts of that training, and it's going to take time to train up on that. It's not going to be instant. It's going to take time out of the work and call function and HR function to go and do that too. And it adds a lot more pressure on that person and on that particular role. And one of the things that I want to look at when we're looking at businesses, and not just these functions and not just HR, it's when you're assessing output, you're looking at productivity, value for money for the roles that people are completing. It's quite hard to ascertain if you're getting good value for money, if in actual fact what you're throwing in that direction, that particular role, is just going to overwhelm. It's just going to burn the house down because it's just too much to sustain it. So you've got to balance that out. And certainly when you're small business, micro business, there's not enough money and there's not enough resource to be able to put that somewhere, but you know that you need it. And that is one of the existing options that you have. And certainly when it comes from, a high need, resource low kind of structuring your business, that's the first stretch on that ladder of where to go with that. The second one is hiring someone full time or even part time within your business. So that's the next option. Now, obviously, with that comes cost. That's the big difference between the first option is you're hiring someone in to do that particular option. Now, the biggest mistakes that I see on this on a regular basis is the micro business hiring someone full time or part time. And I would say, and this is my own rule of thumb, so this isn't something that's written down. This is on me. So this is what I would advise. Until you get to around about the 200 to 250 mark of how many employees you have, I would say hiring someone internally for that dedicated function is probably not where you should be spending your money, and it's not the wisest spend. Just think about it for a minute. It goes one of two ways. You hire somebody in, and whether even if we take them as part time, they're trying to spend an exorbitant amount of time trying to help and support you. But 9 times out of 10, there's not enough work in a business that's hiring, that's just say 25, 50, 75, 100 people. That just statistically won't be enough potentially within that format. So if you're spending out 45 to maybe 60,000 pounds, and that's based on your geography as to where you're located, by the way, as well as your industry niche, potentially that's a huge outlay for something that's not got that huge uptick in work. Hence why people balance between option one and option two. Option one is much more cost effective because you think you can add that on. It's not going to be a role in its own right. You can add that onto someone, but equally it could be that one thing that tips over the edge and becomes all of what that person is doing, which makes you think, well, maybe I should hire someone in to do that. So you're caught between that catch 22. And the second problem with it is if you hire somebody in, first and foremost, trying to attract somebody into that role, into a smaller business where there is less of that work, it's not going to be very attractive to what we call their CPD, so their continued professional development. So as an HR practitioner, you want to be able to demonstrate in terms of your career trajectory and if you've got that and where you want to go, that you've got this ability and experience of dealing with lots of different things. If you're in a smaller business, you're not going to get that array. I mean, sure, you're going to get thrust into everything because you are that HR person, but there's just not going to be enough there to be able to develop you in that particular way. In fact, it's probably going to be counterproductive. It's going to probably unskill you from going into a smaller business. So, therefore, as a smaller business trying to attract somebody in, you're more likely to get somebody who's probably not the caliber that you're probably looking for. And the second part of that is to try and justify the requirement of your own role within that organization, because this is always going to come with scrutiny, right? So to justify your role within that environment, then you could, and I'm not saying everybody would, but you could be looking to try and level up by saying, well, there's a grievance here. We need to investigate that grievance. There's a grievance over there. We're going to investigate that one too. Whoa, I see some bullying and harassment happening, to try and justify the requirement for that role internally. So there are definite benefits because it's one person dedicated to you solely with that skill set potentially in your business, and that's fantastic. But it comes with the salary, it comes with the overheads, and potentially you're not going to get the value for money from that role and from that person. You probably won't be able to attract the person you want into your business till you start hitting that 200 to 250 mark. And that mark there is a personal one. That's not a scientific one. So then that brings us on to the third one, which is to outsource potentially. And you can look at, and there's a variety without mentioning any names. They all look the same. You know who I'm talking about. Different colors, different branding, same package, same product. And that's a call center style. Now, these things can be really good if you're a very micro business because it's low on the cost, should be low on the cost element to this in terms of infrastructure to help you. But you're probably guaranteed you're not going to speak to the same person. So getting that relationship, getting understanding what's happening in the business, Not every business is the same either, so the way you want to react to something could be slightly different. So having a broad brush approach might not be great. But it is cost effective in that particular way, and it does give you access to some core HR requirements you'll have, such as contracts, handbook, templates, etc. But what happens with these is they're normally sold as a time saving and resource saving element for yourselves. And what I would say is, and we have a package that does this slightly differently and more nuanced, but with this, it's a done with you service. And that's the crucial thing. It's not done for you, it's done with you, which means there's a high element and a requirement for you to do something in a world that you don't actually have that experience. If you remember option one, you're probably going to get some training, whoever you're giving that role to give them some kind of skills to be able to do what you're asking them to do, right? Well, if you don't have that skill set and you're hiring someone external to give you help on that, and then they throw it back to you to then go and do and put the pressure on you, and if you do it wrong or it's not in keeping with what they wanted, then potentially lose your employer's tribunal insurance. That's kind of a bit of added pressure you probably didn't expect. And that brings me on to my next core issue with these, which is again is different to how we package this particular item for Cavill. But what you tend to find when you go down this rabbit hole is, in order to do things in your business, to make key decisions, personnel decisions within your organization, you are giving a large chunk of authority to this external company or practitioner, because they're underwriting the insurance. So if they're not happy with how you've done it, or what you're going to do, or what you're intending to do, or what you would like to do, they'll stop you from doing it, because they'll say, we won't cover you and insure you then, and we'll take that rug from underneath you, and therefore you've got to do what we say. So we have a say and authority in how you're going to run your business in that sense. And call me old school, but I think if it's your business, your charity, your organization, whatever you are, then it should be within your purview to make that decision. It's not my decision to make. I will give you the advice. I'll give you professional advice. I will disagree with what you want to do, but ultimately it is your decision. It's your organization. However it's structured, that's what that is. And I'm here to give advice and guidance and try and help and support you to grow. But it's your responsibility, your business in that sense. So that's one of the things to definitely take into account. But again, if you are a micro business, it can be super cost effective and means you're not taking a resource that you already have and retraining it into a different area that it doesn't want to specialize in, and spending that cost and time and energy on those bits. So it does have its place. And that brings me on to the fourth option, which is realistically where that's where our bread and butter is. That's where we sit. And for this, it's still cost effective in the sense that whilst it's more expensive than a done with you, it provides a done for you. So there are no templates. You don't have to go and do that work. It's an HR manager within your team that's outside, which is exactly what we offer. But it should also be helping you to develop your organization too. So if HR is just there as an insurance policy, so when, excuse my French, but when the shit hits the fan, boom, in we go. We tell you what you can do and how to deal with it. It would be a really great world if you could actually see those warning signs and avoid the shit from hitting the fan in the first place. If you could have a more harmonious business, if you could have a more productive, better performing workforce, and value for money for the money you're paying for your workforce as well. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. And I think that's exactly where we want all businesses to be. And that's the other side of HR. HR has two sides: the police force side, which everybody seems to think about. I think that's what HR do. And the other side, which is to fine tune the engine room of your organization to make it more profitable and to make it advance better and to make it a better engine to work with. That's the key infrastructure of HR as a whole. So it's that strategical piece that comes to this. So having those bits is going to help you to get flexibility within that resource. It's there when you need it, does it for you, and supports you how you want. It's not tagging on to another resource and taking your time away from that, having to retrain it. You will get a partnership, so you're going to get the same relationship with the same person. And equally, you're not getting the overhead of having to hire someone in and the risks that are entailed with that as well. And also, it's scalable. So for us, we got different options on that route. So like I said, we've got our HR helpline, which is the done with you kind of service, our productivity booster, which fits straight within the this element here, number four, and that is the most common avenue to go down because it helps them increase the performance of your workforce. And the third option, which is to have some on-site support as well on a monthly basis to help and support and a more strategical leadership approach to that as well. So there's different options there, and there's a lot more flexibility and elasticity around that too. The one thing I would do and say on this to think about, and I think I said this last week as well, is to bear in mind when you have people that charge X amount per month and you don't hear from, don't see them, and it goes away, it's wishy-washy, and then all of a sudden it comes back when you need it, and you get that grievance that pops up, and all of a sudden that month's bill's £5,000 or whatever. That's the thing I would definitely look to steer away from, because you're on a ticking time bomb to a really big bill at some point in the future. That's the one thing you're guaranteed to have, and you'll be left questioning, well, what the hell was I paying all that other money before for? So just to bear those things in mind, and this gives you an overview as to how to kind of consider these things. Now, if you find this bit helpful, by the way, leave a message in a comment below, and we can give you an HR buyer's guide, which really helps you to kind of just put these things into place and kind of tick off what things are really important and give you an idea as to what's probably the best fit for you and how that works. So moving on, I want to look at some of the news headlines. So the big one for this particular month is looking at fraud prevention. Now, this is something that's really coming in for bigger businesses in September, but it makes sense. It's going to apply to you as well if you're a smaller business. And to be honest with you, most of you watching this and reading our newsletter are going to be in a smaller business. And that's because, well, fraud affects small businesses. And if anything, it's going to be just the same as everything that happens in a small business. It's going to be magnified. The impact, the hurt, the pain from that is going to be magnified. Now, I'm going to go off on a small tangent here with a story just to really put this into place. And I'll come back as to some of the things we want to touch on that you want to look at as your first lines of defense. But we worked with a client. They got in contact with us because it was a charity. It was a very small charity. And the business manager that they had in the time, well, they were in control of all of the strings of managing staff, managing finance, managing marketing, managing everything. And this business was a small nursery for children. It's a charity, sorry. And they found out that the trustees, they couldn't get into the bank account. They couldn't even get a bank card because the manager had made that particular play to make it more difficult for anyone else to get involved with it. That's a warning sign. Why does that exist? And then also, when they had to go and spend money on something, they couldn't. It bounced. It wasn't there. And that certainly was not in lines with what their financials were meant to be saying. What they were saying on the face of it in terms of their financial reports they were given by the manager, by the way. And it was really sad because when we did manage to get into the accounts and we did manage to get some reports back on that, we went back over 3 years. And that's as far back as we went, but we think it was going on longer than that. Um, and it identified this person had redecorated, refurbished their home. They'd gone on holidays to Centre Parks. Their children were using it to download games, movies, and other bits and pieces through Amazon. They were doing their weekly shop. So this was also through COVID. So through COVID, when they were shut, they didn't have any children. They didn't need to get any food products in. They still had a monthly food shopping bill. It was extortionate. I mean, literally, the way it went when we were going through it, it was just, you know, all these things have been spent out refurbing their kitchen and I think it was Centre Parks I went away to. They also went abroad for a holiday and paid for that. There was so many things that came out of the woodwork through all these different bits and pieces that it was actually a crying shame because the biggest impact was it threatened the charity. That charity through the process over probably more than 3 years, but the 3 years we reviewed was on the precipice of failure. It was about to close purely because it didn't have the finances to continue running on basic things. So after they'd come out of COVID and they were running again, it didn't have the finance to be able to afford some of the food items for the children. This was a charity for kids. And that is what I mean by how something like that can magnify in terms of a small business. And don't get me wrong, that's going to be massively painful for a bigger organization too. And probably you'll look at the figures will be even more tenfold than that. But I know through that process, we estimated over 3 years that person had spent somewhere between three and £500,000 that was not in the business. And by the way, one of the biggest things that came out as a shock was they were taking double wages. So they were paying themselves wages and then they were paying the wages again to themselves. Um, and all through that time, the way that happened was because they locked out anybody else from being able to see it. They were the ones that provided the reports, which were manipulated. They were wrong, and that meant their financial accounts were also wrong. So you can see all the big things that came up. And before you ask, yes, that we did report that to actual fraud as well. It did go to the police and becomes a criminal matter as well as a civil matter. But there are, as you can tell through that story, some real touch points that are warning signs that this is happening. Probably before you get 3 years down that road in that case, in the case of that organisation. So watch for those warning signs. There are a large degree of red flags. Um, and and I think putting all your eggs in one basket in terms of control is, well, it's asking for trouble. So definitely that would be one thing. But these things don't happen out of the blue. They take time to get to that place. Never does fraud happen in one go. People tend to do something, realize they got away with it, and then that boundary that they've set for what's right and wrong starts to grow, and they'll do more, they'll do bigger, and they'll do it more often. So it's not a one-off event. There will be triggers. There will be red flags down that road. So keep an eye out for the warning signs. Review who can access sensitive information. Take that case in point. It was one person above anybody else, even the trustees and the chair of that charity had access to all of those bits. In fact, it was so bad that no one else could get immediate access to it. It had to go through a whole, I can't remember the whole process they went through, but it went through a protracted process with the bank to be able to get access to that. So make sure you're not putting all your eggs in one basket and encourage openness. Speak, have a culture where people can report things and speak up and be able to take part in these bits and pieces and talk to somebody in confidence. Maybe do, if someone needs to do whistleblowing and they have that avenue, make sure people are aware of what that process is, that they can do that, and the fact that they'll be supported through that particular process. Again, on this, if you need help reviewing this or your own personal risks, then leave a message below for me and we'll get in contact, or click on the link at the bottom and book a call. Next part that I want to look at is quietly taking holidays. Are your staff doing this? The quiet vacationing. And is this something that is real? I think this is something for me that's more born about from the ability to work from home more often. And quietly just going abroad seems a bit of a stretch to me, but apparently those are things that are happening. 81% of the UK companies are now using tracking tools to track staff in that particular way. So should that be something you should consider? I think as a small business, that is kind of using a sledgehammer to break a nut. I think it's definitely about looking internally as to what's happening and how you are tracking things. I always remind myself of a client that we worked for who thought that home workers, their words, not mine, home workers are home shirkers. I don't think all home workers would necessarily agree to that. People can work from home and be productive. They can. And I think just because you can't see a person physically doesn't mean that they're not doing anything. And certainly just because you can see someone physically doesn't mean they're doing something. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. So I think it's about, and this comes back to the main point, measuring output, measuring performance, and what is expected for somebody realistically to be able to achieve, and making sure people are actually doing that. And if they're not and they're falling short, then you can ask your questions, and see how that works. But I think if this is something you're finding and experiencing, and I will say it's something that's quite common when people have got some kind of hybrid working or working from home process with their staff, to be able to keep track of that, out of sight, out of mind is another problem. Then just again, click on the link below and give us a quick chat, and we can talk through some things and strategies that you quite easily put into place to start to plug some of those holes and get some crucial data back as to what people are doing, not doing, and whether it's what you need them to do. 1 in 5 applicants are lying about their degrees. Shock, horror. I don't think this is anything new, by the way. I think years ago people were still doing this. I mean, it reminds me of the movie Catch Me If You Can with Abnally. I can't remember his name now, something like that, where he decided he's going to be a doctor, so created a fake degree. It's nothing new, I don't think, in that sense of things, but it is something that if it's a core element of a role that you're looking into, so if it is a high, like for example, if you're hiring a doctor or a physician or something in that kind of nature that requires that level of a degree, and that's an essential criteria of that job, that maybe when you're doing your pre-employment checks might be something you want to get involved in. And it's quite easy to phone up authorities and just check those if you wanted to in terms of what's been put forward. What I would say is majority of times, even when you have a role that does require that degree, how many of you are actually looking for a copy of that person's qualification? So I would say, as well as 1 in 5 applicants are lying, I'd love to see the statistics as to how many are actually checking if they have that or not as part of their pre-employment checks. So I'll leave that there for you. But again, it's a simple check and it can save major costs from hiring someone who's actually not qualified to do the job. Um, and moving on from that, kind of in the same topic and process, really, is looking at AI and CVs. So is this sabotaging your hiring process? So what looks good on paper potentially may not be able to do the job. And again, I would say this again is nothing new. So even before AI, people were able to write really glorified, glowing CVs that look amazing. And that's what we've always called the probationary period, the put your money where your mouth moment is, because you get to actually, that's an extension of the recruitment process. You're trying to evaluate if somebody is the suitable candidate to do that role still, but you're doing it in a live process. They're getting paid for it, sure, but you're able to see live whether that person, regardless of what they said in the interview, on their CVs, etc., whether they can actually do what they said they could do on the tin. And that's your kind of trial kind of process moment. But there's other ways that you can look around that. So you give them, as part of the interview process, a quick skills task. So that's where you get them to do a test of some sort. You give them real business challenges. So again, in interview processes, it's good to give some kind of scenario-based questions. And they could be live to things that you've actually experienced or experiencing in your business within that role specifically, and see how they would deal with that and what the response to it would be. You could do team-based interviews. Again, working back on something else we talked about, if you add too many phases to things and interviewing people, you could turn people off. So balance this out. And the last one is looking at paid trials. Well, paid trials, I would say I would use the probationary period. If you think someone is a suitable candidate through the CV and the interview process, do the probation. And if they are the suitable candidate, then great. If it's showing that actually what they've been saying on their CV and what they've been telling you in an interview don't actually match up to what that person can do in reality, then don't sit around and wait for the probationary period to close. Act quickly, hire slow, take your time to find the right person. But if they're the wrong person, act quick, fire fast. Is my kind of analogy for that, and that's what we have in our training: hire slow, fire fast. Oddly enough, but it's all about making those smarter hires and not just the faster ones. So just bear that in mind. Sometimes there's a necessity to fill a role and there's an urgency behind that. And I totally get that and I totally understand that. And I'm not sidelining that. But if you're not careful, you're going to make a decision in panic that's not going to benefit you in the longer term. So just bear that in mind as well. And again, if that's something you think you might need help with and you're looking for some support, please get in contact with me. And like I just alluded to, we've got a great training program on Hire Slow Fire Fast that's still extremely relevant in one of our biggest trainings that we have at the moment in time on there that will help you with that. So what I want to do is I'll leave that there and I'll let you read at the bottom of this article, the newsletter. If you're watching this on the podcast, but I always do this at the very end. This is a podcast that's available online on YouTube and also wherever you can download your podcasts. If you are watching us through that mechanism, then the link to be able to get access to newsletters and articles like this will be below. If you click on that, then please come on board. Love to have you here and to share this with you. If you are watching this and you are on the article, then please go ahead. The link will be below for you to go and click and download our newsletter and get some further information. But even if you, after you've watched this, if you watch this and you've got any questions, need any help, need any support, then again, please let us know and we can have a confidential chat. Any comments you got, put in the DMs below. I'd love to have them and see what you think. And any questions you might have would be great. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.